The Reader, Take Two. Emma Benedetti, Counter Goodwin, Molly Berger, Lily Thomas, Charlotte Reese. The Reader was written by Bernard Schlink. He was born in Bethel, Germany. He was actually a law professor, similar to Michael, the main character. He became a judge in Germany, and he wrote several detective novels before writing The Reader. The Reader is actually partially autobiographical because he himself was part of the Lucky Late Born, and he lived near a synagogue that was burned to the ground, and much like Michael, he studied and took part in practicing law. So after World War II, Germany was a total mess. It ended up being divided into four sections, and the Federal Republic of Germany was created out of the Western zones, and that's where Michael lives, and that's the setting of the novel. And then the German Democratic Republic was created out of the Soviet-controlled zone, which was not where Michael was, but that was where the Russians came in. And the child death rate rose 10 times that of pre-war Germany, just because of the negative effects of the war. There's the Lucky Late Born is kind of the overarching theme of the novel, specifically defined. They are the generation after World War II, today known as the baby boomers. They are the children whose parents were involved in the war. And the children are faced with this dilemma because their parents are war criminals. They've got either got to choose to love and defend the parent, like in spite of what they've done, versus self-righteousness, and they condemn their actions, and they end up with this numbness and moral detachment because this huge devastating part of their history is just happened, and so many horrific things happened that there's no way to actively experience it without developing some sort of numbness to the atrocities. And this is evident within Michael during the trial. The His friends who only come once a week are still shocked by it. Well, since he's there every day, he has to develop this numbness. Otherwise, he would be constantly shocked and traumatized. All right. So now it is Charlotte's turn to present. All right.
Okay, so life as a guard in Auschwitz. There were 55,000 guards, but out of those, only 3,700 of them were women because of the prevalent sexism during that time. And women guards were only recruited because of the shortage of guards and the high demand for jobs, and they were only recruited from the middle to lower classes, like Hannah. Male SS guards were told to respect the female guards, but instead there was a ton of sexual corruption and sexual relations between the guards and rape and things like that. Many women were dismissed from their job because they were too kind to the prisoners. However, this was not always true. As you can see in the book, Hannah was torturous to her prisoners, and many other women were as well, as I will show you in a later slide. And if given the choice, guards would have rather worked in a camp rather than fighting in the Red Army, but of course, women could not do that. So they did not. So the Germans had to hide their concentration camps from the Soviets so that they wouldn't get in trouble, and they forced the prisoners to march for hundreds of miles to hide. And anyone who lagged behind either died of hunger, was shot, was tortured to death, just died because they were too tired, whatever. And Geisha Street in Warsaw was the first major death march. However, there were many, many others. And 3,600 prisoners were forced to march 80 miles, where they were put on a train at the very end. And out of the 3,600, 1,600 died, and only 2,000 survived the march. Most of the deaths were women and children. So, Ilse Koch. Many people think that Hannah was based on her because of the striking similarities between her and Hannah. she was a female guard, but not at Auschwitz, at a place called Buchenwald, and she was actually known as the Witch of Buchenwald, or if you want to replace witch with the B word, she was called that more. And she was accused of actually torturing the prisoners, and apparently she would choose specific prisoners to be killed, specifically ones with tattoos. And what she would do is very interesting. Apparently, this is not, this has no real evidence, but this is what has been told to many, many people and has been passed down for generations, that she would slice off the tattoos of the prisoners that she would kill, and then she would make lampshades out of them and other things. So there's actually a Stephen King novel that has lampshades made of skin, and that's based off of her. Obviously, Hannah did not do this in the book, but she did torture her, the prisoners, in other ways as well. So she was tried, like Hannah, for war crimes and ended up being guilty on 2 separate occasions. And after a while, her sentence was reduced because they realized that they really had no solid evidence that she tortured the prisoners that much, and they had no real evidence of the skin and stuff like that. So her sentence was reduced, and her and her son wrote back and forth, similar to Hannah and Michael's writing, but her son wrote poems instead of sending her tape recordings of him reading. Ilse Koch was actually a librarian assistant and was very, very literate. So that is one of the major differences between Hannah and Ilse. And it's really not believed that that Hannah is solely based off of Ilse Koch. Actually, Schlink said that Hannah is not based off of one single guard, and that he made her up in his head, but obviously there are many, many guards that match up with her profile, but aren't perfect. So before her son visited, and one of the days where she was, I think she was in her 60s, he visited her, and the night before she had actually committed suicide, and he came to the prison and was told that she had committed suicide in her cell, and and it is the same kind of situation that Michael and Hannah were in towards the end of the book, where Hannah had killed herself, and Michael was coming to get her from jail the next day, or sorry, prison for the next day, and found that she had killed herself. So denazification was a huge movement by the Germans to rid of the Nazi society, because the Nazis and Germany as a whole had so much guilt over the Holocaust, because they knew that it was wrong after the fact. While it was happening, it was really, it was justified in so many ways by Hitler and by other people, falsely justified, and it was kind of the norm at the time, but just because it was the norm did not make it right. So after the fact, they realized how horrible everything was that they had done, so it was a bunch of laws that tried to resolve the Nazi society and rid of it completely. And it had judicial procedures on how to handle war crimes that